for helping put this session together, and for Lynn Benyon for presenting. I was thinking just a few minutes ago that preventing faculty burnout. I think that the people that are totally burned out won't even be here to benefit from this. So we're just partly burned out. So it'll be helpful for us. But I was thinking there's got to be some faculty in our college who just totally said, we're done. I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to take it easy today. But anyway, I'll turn it over to Mona Nawako.
Well, good morning, and I'm delighted to be here and so happy to see so many people here. We want to talk a little bit about faculty burnout, and this topic really came up from an email that the dean sent out from an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education. But I think one of the things that is helpful is to come up with a definition of burnout. There are many definitions of burnout out there. But this one was coined in 1975, and it talks about emotional exhaustion, which is fatigue from caring too much or too long, depersonalization, which is depletion of empathy, caring, and compassion, and decreased sense of accomplishment, which is an unconquerable sense of futility, that nothing you do makes any difference. There have been some interesting things since COVID showed up in our world. This is a survey that was done by Fidelity with the Chronicle of Higher Education. And between 2019, which are the blue bars, and 2020, which are the yellow bars, showing a marked increase in stress, anger, and fatigue. And 55% of faculty have seriously considered changing careers or leaving the profession. So I think that was something that really caught my attention. The anger, stress, and fatigue seems like on and off part of our daily lives, but the fact that it was getting to the point that faculty were considering leaving teaching was really an eye-opening thing for me. Additionally, many of us know that female faculty were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. They had additional childcare, parenting care. This isn't to say that male faculty haven't been engaged in this, but when you look at the survey shows that female faculty have reported this at much higher levels than males. 82% of females say the workload has increased versus 20% of males, and a decline of work-life balance, which is a little more evenly distributed, with 70% of women reporting this and 63% of men reporting it. In a different study, they looked at sort of demographic factors, job factors, and personal factors that were associated with burnout, which included younger age, sex differences, less than 10 years of experience, lack of tenure. Job factors were high job demands, role conflict, lack of clarity, lack of social support, lack of resources, lack of participation and decision-making, lack of job satisfaction, perceived stress and large class sizes. And personal factors were things like low optimism, low extroversion, emotional instability, low motivation, type A personality. I think that was a little bit of a surprise to me. I think that I probably exhibit some of those characteristics, and psychological disorders, so other kinds of health problems as well. In a third study that I just briefly looked at, it really affected, the burnout affected faculty's quality of life, and men had higher quality life in 3 areas, which are often measured, which are physical health, psychological health, and social health. Women reported being more exhausted. There was no difference in faculty quality of life by area in which the faculty were teaching, so discipline specific. Faculty who felt tired before arriving at work, and I get up at 5, so I sort of think that's me on some days, had lower quality of life. Faculty who need more time to relax after work were less satisfied with their health, and burnout is associated with many factors as well. So I just wanted to give a brief introduction, and we're going to turn the time over to Lynn Benyon, who's a clinical professor and licensed psychologist. She works in counseling and psychological services here on campus, and she received her degree from Purdue University in 1986. And we're just delighted that Lynn could be here with us, and I'll turn the time over to her now. Lynn, you're on mute.
Lynn, you're muted.
We still can't hear you. You're still on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Well, I have had great interest in what we call in psychology the imperative, ethical imperative of self-care. I went to a 6-hour workshop at the American Psychological Association convention. And ever since then, it's been a topic that really interests me. For us as psychologists who are practicing therapy or counseling or teaching, it relates to the ethical principles of competence and beneficence, because if we have personal problems, we're going to do work that's not as skilled and perhaps not as empathic. So anyway, I'm going to begin with more of this, kind of an informal discussion. And then I'm going to save some time for hearing your ideas. I'll present 7 strategies along the way. Okay. Now, if I could get my PowerPoint to advance. Okay, we ready to do the poll questions? Okay. Okay, we still getting some results in? Okay. Well, let's go with what we have. Sorry to rush people, but can you show us the results to question 1?
Sorry, just 1 second. Here we go.
Oh, good. Okay.
You see those?
All right. So I guess they put in orange the highest percentage. So 40% of us have been mildly burned out at some points, depending on how you define it, I guess. But only 8% have not or confessed to having not experienced much burnout. That does, well, it surprises me in that it's even lower than I thought it would be, but it looks like the majority of us have either experienced burnout or we're not sure. I wanted to put an answer that, well, I have a friend who's burned out, so I'm here to learn about how to help him or her. Okay, question number 2, if you've experienced burnout this year, who did you talk to about it? Okay, I know you can read this, but 26% talked to probably multiple people. 46% talked to a spouse or family member. That's not surprising. But look at this. How many have talked with colleagues at BYU? 4%. Colleagues beyond BYU, 2%. So I will try to keep those things in mind as we go. I don't know who's here. I could only see a few of you on the sidebar, but I figure you know more than I do about some of these topics. So I'm going to just be personal, give a few recommendations, and then ask some discussion questions. I ran out of time with this PowerPoint. I have to confess that it's my black hole for time management. When I make PowerPoint slides, I want to look for the best images I can include. And since this might be recorded, I was really mindful of copyright law. So I looked at tons and tons of images and wasted most of my time for creating slides, looking at pictures. But here are some of, and I can be glad to email this if anyone's interested. Here are some of the sources that I'll quote and or that I think are interesting. The Chronicle of Higher Education, as Mona introduced, has had several articles about burnout or related topics, but I'll send you those if you'd like to know who I'm quoting. Okay, this time I'm quoting a client. My main job, and especially spring and summer, it's about the only job, is meeting with BYU students in counseling. And the most common presenting concerns are depression or anxiety. We get a lot of other things, but burnout is kind of in the same neighborhood. For example, when we're depressed, we have low energy, we lose interest in things. Anyway, so I've been just astonished this year at how many students in my student development class or in therapy have said they have no motivation. That's, I think, just anecdotally what I've heard the most of. I don't have any interest in it. A student said this to me last week. I always loved learning, but this past year has taken that from me. And I think that really captures what I see as sort of the heartache of burnout is if you're used to being a lively thinker, and I think university professors usually are, they know how to cultivate curiosity. They're concerned about their students discovering how fun it is to learn and becoming a more active learner again, if that's been kind of systematically extinguished. So I told you I did lots of image searches, and this one came up, and it still strikes me as sort of funny. So this was an Australian news outlet, but look at what they saw as the biggest news of 2020. Granted, they're not Americans, but there's Kate and Harry, the second picture there. And I don't know what the jumping in fields is about. But anyway, I think if I were to choose the biggest news of 2020, it wouldn't be Prince Harry. Let's see. I need to decrease this a little bit. Sorry about this. I just want to be able to see the time so I don't go over. I mean, I think for me, the biggest events certainly have been COVID. I wasn't impacted much by the Dow Jones Industrial Average plummet because I have a job that I was able to do from home, and I'm okay that way. I've been very concerned troubled by racial violence and Black Lives Matter and so on. I watched I shouldn't confess this, but I watched the video of Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck. I don't know how many times, but maybe at least 6 probably. I was trying to figure out from Derek Chauvin's face what was going on. Anyway, I think we're in an incredibly divided country right now with, I don't know, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals. I have no idea what our group here is comprised of, but there's been a lot of anger and even hatred. I was surprised one day in a family Zoom meeting when an extended family member was just outright denying the existence of racism, including systemic racism. And I got so mad. I might have even said something like, I can't talk to you right now. But I was surprised, and been surprised, I guess, repeatedly by how strong my emotions are sometimes about politics and the welfare of people. I'm guessing many of you have probably known people who passed away from COVID. Okay, so as I was looking at a lot of pictures, this one jumped out at me. It was the most compelling. When I had to start teaching over Zoom, that I had all kinds of technical problems with it, but I also knew I had to adjust my teaching style, put in some, well, I already tried to make it really interactive, but some of what I could do in a classroom, I couldn't do online. But this is a woman who must teach, she teaches ukulele lessons, and probably a lot of those she teaches are pretty young. But look at all she's doing to keep her student or students entertained. And that kind of impulse to add some razzle dazzle or I don't know, video clips, I think I could relate to that. Okay, so just as a summary, for me personally, some of you may even know my mother, Francine Benyon, but she's been a brittle diabetic all her life. She has congestive heart failure and ventricular and arterial, atrial, anyway, a lot of things going on, and her health has been very fragile and has varied a lot. So my first priority has been to not catch COVID and then not be able to go over as the closest living child, go over and help her. And that's been super motivating. I was already isolated because of some switches in the jobs I perform at the BYU Counseling Center. I moved upstairs. And then when I went back to working at CAPS, I kept my office because it had windows. It was on the main floor, and my mood went way up when I moved into that office. So now I'm upstairs. I get to see the director, Steve Smith, from time to time, but I don't see my peers, my fellow counselors coming and going. And the neighbors on either side of me, plus my third kind of best friend in the neighborhood, have all moved recently. And so I've got a lot of reasons, but certainly the pandemic added to my sense of isolation. I live with 2 dogs, and they're both weird, which is a good fit with me. But anyway, that was not enough interaction to keep me healthy. If I didn't have gardening space, I'd probably be non-functional at this point. Another source of stress for me, again, has been the technology. I tried to get out of teaching my class this year, but our coordinator said that so many teachers had beat me to it and already quit that he really needed me to teach. Some of my worst nightmares came true. On the first day of class, we got about half of the students were there. And it turned out that the new tech TA and I, we didn't think of letting them know that they needed to go in to create a BYU Zoom account. So a lot of them were just trying to do it with their personal Zoom account and getting really frustrated. And then the second day of class, first day of class, I had posted the link for the Zoom meeting on Learning Suite, but I didn't do it the second time because I thought now they know where to look. But there was something in how the TA and I set up the Zoom schedule, meeting schedule, that was not visible to the students. So a lot of them didn't have the link. Anyway, those are some of the sources of stress I've experienced. Before I leave the images, I just have to share this, and this might be a copyright issue, I don't know, but here's from the Chronicle of Higher Education. This also caught my eye. I put my face mask on first. And of course, thinking about COVID, I'm thinking, oh, so you make sure you put on your mask before you go in and teach. But it relates to that old and wonderful metaphor of if you're flying in a plane and there's a problem and the masks drop, we're instructed to take care of ourselves and then take care of others. Anyway, I just thought that was funny that when I read that, this predates COVID, but my first thought was COVID masks. I tend to think about many things through a lens about COVID-19. So briefly, can I ask for a couple of comments? What were some of the events or factors that created stress or led to burnout for you? Or a friend, created burnout for a friend, you know. This is kind of what it was like to teach through Zoom.
I was just going to say, when you'd ask a question in class on Zoom and nobody responded, you either had to get really tough and just sit there or start calling on people. So that was stressful.
Yes, that was one of the many Zoom adventures for me. And I'm used to outweighting people in therapy sessions, but it was still stressful. And I couldn't hear if any of them were chuckling at my attempts to inject a little humor. It was just hard. And oh, good, there's some chat ideas. Okay, let's see if I can pull that up.
Mute.
What's that?
I'm sorry. Managing the kids, schooling with my own work, cannot interact with loved ones, quickly shifting courses online, working from home, chronic health issues, family concerns, supporting my own kids, homeschooling. So a lot of them are related to with kids. And Karen actually raised the questions.
Okay. One more comment. I can't see the chat. Mona, can you see the chat?
I was just going to say that I found it, I had so many students who just crashed and burned, and I found that exhausting, trying to help them and convince them to get help. I'll just tell you quickly, even after the end of the semester and final grades, I got a lengthy email from a student listing all the things she'd done terribly and how she deserved a poor grade and all this. And, you know, if we were, it's exhausting. It's just exhausting. I don't know, you know, you try to remain empathetic, but it wears on you.
Yes. And boy, the teaching, how teaching has been affected. There was an article, I don't think I put it on the sources page, I can add it, but looking at past research that relates to the question of Zoom fatigue. I didn't have data at the time of publication yet, but they had data about a lot of parts that were relevant. And the eye strain, having to look at yourself, the reflection of you all of the time. Normally when we're talking with people or teaching a class, we aren't staring at the listener all of the time. We don't move as much. Anyway, I think you've done a nice job, and thank you, Niwako and Karen. They're just lots and lots of stressors we've been dealing with. Okay, so let's talk about a few strategies, and then I'll be asking you what you found helpful. And we can either do small group breakout sessions or kind of the large group. We can see what we want to do when we get there. Most of these I came up with myself, but they're also in some of the articles that I've read. So awareness of the stress we're dealing with or the burnout we're starting to feel is really key. And then the next step of acknowledging it to ourselves. Academics are supposedly more likely to be kind of perfectionistic and want to do everything well. Anyway, for some, it's really hard. They're not used to tuning into what they're feeling or how tired they are. They're just used to go, go, go. So, you know, can I do the Relief Society thing? Is someone willing to read these comments from the McMurtry article?
I can.
Thank you very much.
If the pandemic has stripped teaching of what makes it invigorating, it's also exacerbated aspects of academic life that were already challenging professors' mental health, such as the impulse to work hard to meet students' needs, even at the cost of depleting themselves. So, want me to read all three of them?
Sure, thank you.
The steadfast commitment to pretending it's not happening is really damaging. The third one, if we start talking about it, the more we don't have the shame associated with it, and the better we can get together.
Okay, thank you. I think that would be an interesting topic if we had a lot more time. How do you know, or what's it like to try to take better care of yourself or have to think about it more? Mona showed some symptoms of burnout. These are the ones I tend to think of first. With emotional exhaustion, when I saw Mona's PowerPoint ahead of time, I thought, what does it mean to care too much for too long? And I think most of us can't quit caring about our students, but a lot of other things can create. Do we get a sense of whether we're any good based on how our students behave? Do we find ourselves using a lot of personal time to help someone? Anyway, you probably know what that means to be physically or emotionally exhausted. For me, I would say I've experienced some anxiety. I would definitely, I was anxious at times during the past year. But I was really lucky, and it might be because I pray a lot. I pray before each session for help to understand the person, guidance, and what would be helpful that I can do, but also to care about the person and find them interesting. So whether it's largely a matter of prayer or just my intent, I have been able to care about each client. And I'm kind of surprised that hasn't been exhausted. But when I finish with seeing clients, I don't want to do anything else. I just want to sit on the sofa and binge watch TV. But these are things to look for if you're having more trouble with insomnia. I can't say where I know this person from. Someone I know said she gets physically sick to her stomach every Monday morning when it's time to go to work and start a new week. Anyway, I think those are, for most of us, not hard to identify. So the first point was to be aware of things that are signs of burnout and to acknowledge them. Some of the writers I looked at said it's important to acknowledge those experiences we're having with burnout with our students, because that way we're giving them an example that you can be a confident person, you can keep working when things are hard, but it's normal to not be able to perform like you used to or like you did in a live classroom. I thought that was interesting, and so I'm fully using that strategy right now, giving myself permission to not give all the citations in exactly the right way. I'm not sure how much our varied group knows or thinks about self-care, but this can include certainly health, things that we do to stay healthy physically. But there's several perspectives that I find helpful. Mindfulness and self-compassion, at least in my field, kind of relate to observing what we're thinking and feeling without judging them. And that's, I think, a real art that we can learn, to just kind of observe what we're thinking and feeling, and then also to find ways to restore our energy. Anyway, I've find activities that feed your spirit. That could be, well, it is definitely a metaphor, but let me move on. I'll come right back to that. These are overlapping or interwoven. So I found so many articles and YouTube videos on 7 tips for avoiding burnout, 15 steps to avoiding burnout. I couldn't believe how much stuff was out there for you to look at if you're wondering if you're burned out. Part of that is that I think it's not a diagnosis. in the DSM, diagnostic system. So kind of anybody and everybody comes up with their ideas about what would be helpful. But Flower Darby in her Chronicle article addressed the idea of that many professors ended up using new tools and techniques that were more complex and thus more stressful to use than necessary. It's just one example of a way to try to keep things simple. I think I'm going to go ahead and squander some of our time with a video, if I can. Oh, you know what? I closed it somehow. Anyway, so no video. You may have seen a video of this. This man was being interviewed on BBC, I think, and he was talking about some serious topic, and what looks like his daughter came in and started dancing, the photobombing thing now. And then a little kid, an even younger kid rolls in on some wheels. And then you see a younger woman dash in and grab them as she's ducking. Anyway, this guy, for at least part of his interview, didn't know all that was going on in the background. And a couple of you, Niwako, maybe Karen mentioned, if you're trying to care for children or even dogs with special needs, like seizure disorders, it can be very hard not to be distracted at times, or to have your kind of personal appearance of having it all together maintained. I had a friend who teaches at the University of Utah, and after a Zoom class session, she realized that with the camera pointed the way it was, there was a full view of her messy kitchen. So anyway, we lose control and we find things stressful. Okay, here's the $1 million question. How do we do this? Establish work boundaries. I think that sounds really, really good, but in practice, it's hard to do. So Samuel, would you be willing to read again? I'm sorry to keep picking on.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Now that many professionals are working from home, it's even easier for work to trickle into hours normally reserved for rest or recreation. It's inevitable that unexpected timely tasks will pop up on occasion, but do your best to stick with a routine that separates work time from personal time. For example, consider adding a fake commute to your routine, which replaces the daily transition from work to home with walks, runs, and bike rides. And if you don't have a dedicated home office, do your best to reserve your workspace for work alone.
Thank you. I have to do that last part, reserve this space for work, because there isn't another part of my home that's clean and tidy. Same problem my friend had. So what do you find helpful in trying to separate work from home as best you can, or balance different roles you play? Okay, now I'm thinking we're going to do breakout groups in a minute. Some of you are probably doing something else, but for those that are willing, we'll have group discussion later.
Lynn,
oh, please.
Lynn, my name's Dana Hunter. I'm happy to share.
Thank you.
I have had to be very intentional about my Saturdays, and it's really easy. I mean, so I teach in the foods lab, and we had to quickly pivot from having 3 students in a lab to 1 student in a lab. So we had to scale all of our recipes. And it's just there's been a lot of reason to keep working late and work on Saturday. And so I've just been really intentional about setting aside Saturday for time with my kids, or with my walking friends. I have walking friends and we walk on Saturday mornings. So yeah, just being really, and I'm already intentional about Sunday, but I've made a point, especially since January, to be very intentional about my Saturdays also.
Okay, well, I love that. Thank you. Anyone else? following Dana's pioneering the scary thing of commenting?
Some said, I'm not good at this, but I have been trying to check email only during work hours
Ah,
or a 6-mile walk before my lecture.
okay, wow. Boy, I love, those are good strategies. Can we hear one or two more about how you try to balance work and home?
I would add, sometimes things come up with family demands that are not predictable within a 9 to 5 schedule. So if I need to take 2 hours to help my parents, then I take 2 hours in other time to do work time.
My mother took her to the hospital once for the heart problems, and I just had to let everything else go. And once you've had to do it, I think it's a little easier to do it voluntarily, but just to say everyone lived when I just took a break from answering emails or planning the world's best PowerPoint and lecture for the next day. Anyway, I think that's, if we're intentional about that, if we prioritize, I think family relationships, friends, pretty important. Let me hear one more comment about how you try to balance work during this pandemic era with other things that are important to you.
Lynn, this is Zach Chase. I was just thinking about how helpful it's been for me. This may not be a technique as much, but every time that I think we probably all have this tendency to be our own worst critic, to expect the most from ourselves. And I just think that I'm just thinking of all of the times that I was talking to a friend in my department or my office, or talking to my wife at home, or talking to a brother, and had the person say, you know, they don't care that much about this as much as you care. You know, you were talking about putting together the best PowerPoint, or particularly this last semester, putting together a conference presentation. And, you know, having a colleague, and this is the same sort of thing that I've mentioned to colleagues in conversations. It's really great to have that sort of, you know, just that outside voice to help you remember, you know, it's really true. I didn't pay, you know, I wasn't scrutinizing everyone's slide in every presentation in that session either. And of course, they're not doing it with mine. Just to have that outside perspective that helps to remember, oh yeah, the end of the world is not bound up in this PowerPoint that I have put together by class time tomorrow or not.
And Zach has mentioned a couple of the strategies I think are important, because yes, part of burnout, and I'm so sorry, come here, Ben, come here, Lacey. My dog with the seizure disorder has lately been making all kinds of noises. She'll groan for a long time, and I don't know if it's instrumental. She's trying to get me to pet her, or she needs to outside, or she's having visions of things I can't see, but that's been one of my, doesn't happen often, but while I'm presenting today, it's happening. I don't know if you heard her best groans, but anyway, I think, okay, hey, can you settle? It's going to be just a minute. Okay.
Lynn, there's a couple of comments in the chat. Adams wants to some help with, I spend 40 hours on the computer. I'm actually relieved when something interrupts my work hours, but it means making them up on Saturday. And Diane Tice talks about setting work boundaries has gotten much more difficult for me in the pandemic. Students seem to expect replies to emails within an hour at any time of the day or night, and often expect me to complete things for them, letters of recommendations, etc., in less than 8 hours. I often have a full day and cannot drop everything else to meet their needs. This puts on me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for keeping an eye on the chat feed for me. Thank you. Yeah, so you know what? I'm going to go let the dog out. Try to come up with a comment or two while I open the door. I'll be right back.
So does anybody have suggestions to help Joyce or Diane?
I like, this is Dana again. I like what Nicole posted later and that she's upfront with her students. I think it might be a good idea to, even if it's mid-semester, let students know, you know, it will take me a couple of days to get back to you. I do not respond in an hour. It's just not possible. So I think if we let them know up front, I mean, Nicole mentioned that she lets them know that her Canvas course isn't perfect and she's working on it and it's a work in progress. But also as far as our response to emails or things that students request us to do, to just let them know that there's not a 10-minute turnaround and to be upfront about that.
Yeah, I think communicating with students about the conditions we share together. When I was first having them submit their little writing exercises, some of them didn't know how to submit it. So they'd use some format that Learning Suite doesn't acknowledge. And I just had to say from, well, days 1 and 2, we had some major technological issues resulting in a lot of students not even being there. So I just talked to them about it. Sometimes they'd have a suggestion for each other for how to upload documents, but sorry, I missed part of that discussion, but the groaning dog is now outside. I like this suggestion. It comes from the Abramson, the ethical imperative of self-care article. And John Norcross is someone who's written a lot about this topic pre-pandemic and probably, I don't know, post. He said, or Abramson quotes him, "Make every effort to home in on personal and professional successes, no matter how small." Norcross recommends running a mental video of successful cases or teaching experiences you've worked with. You could also keep track of encouraging words from colleagues or students. We need to be reminded of the good work we're doing. I have some clients who are experiencing things related to burnout, keep a different kind of a gratitude journal at the end of the day for those that have just been shredding themselves, to literally write down in a log 3 things that you felt good about that happened that day, no matter how small they are. When during the day did you feel like you did something well? And I guess if you ask those searching questions, you might come up with nothing. But I think if we dig a little deeper, doing something to help us remember or stay mindful of the other side, the things that we are doing well. Okay, I'm almost done with these slides, and I'd love to hear any more comments. I think this might be the last one. Seeking support. As Abramson says, it is easy to isolate in chronic stress or depression or burnout. And then we have social distancing, and that makes it even harder. So I like this comment she makes. Prioritizing social interactions with friends and family can be helpful, but a professional outlet is meaningful too. To take advantage of community support, you can also find a mentor, connect with your supervision group, reach out to professional organizations. Psychologists also occasionally go to therapy themselves. But that's another question I'd be interested in hearing. What is it like to ask for support, or maybe just stealthily start talking to someone about your concerns? Okay, I've been rushing through the summary slide. This comes from the 6-hour APA workshop I went to, and I don't have a better attribution at the moment, but make self-care a priority. Our strongest protection is our own self-awareness. Avoid isolation, identify sources of support. I think it helps if we can be proactive, but it can help if we're already in a deep hole to think, where's a place that people can talk? So challenge self-defeating assumptions about seeking help is another thing. Well, I think I'm supposed to end in about 5 minutes. So there, good. I've got people. Oh, look at all those chat ideas. Okay, for the last few minutes, I would love to hear any additional ideas that you have about how to either avoid burnout or manage it if it's there.
One of the things I tried in my class was just the last about 5 minutes of class, we just sort of opened it up to talk. And a lot of times it was about questions I had about assignments or things that were going on. But in the comments I got back from students, many of them said that 5 minutes that we could just chat in class, and I would hang on for as long as students were talking, as long as I could, and didn't have a competing meeting, and just let them talk or get direct feedback, or have them put something up and say, I don't understand this, and we could just talk through it. And that decreased the number of lengthy emails I got significantly. So 5 minutes of chat saved my life.
Okay. Yeah, I've tried to make room to process it, but I hadn't thought to just reserve a segment of class to ask what they want to talk about. I love that. Time for one or two more.
It might not be a strategy, but during the pandemic, I found out that I am fighting with my husband so many times. Before, we didn't fight so much, but now we are fighting. And then finally, I found out that, man, I might be burned out. So I think that the first thing that we have to know is, really listen to our body is telling me, or what changes, and pay attention to those things. And then finally find out that, oh man, I'm so anxious, I'm so irritable, and all of those stuff. So I think it's the self-awareness is the first step for me. And after that, our fight has decreased, a good thing.
Oh, good. Okay. I love that. If I had someone living with me at the moment, I don't know, they probably would have left. If someone was with me at the start of the pandemic, the dogs have to keep me. Okay. Can I just read a couple of these comments? You may have seen these from the chat part. Grace for yourself and your efforts, empathize with and encourage colleagues. Boy, that's a golden. I think it's so helpful when we feel able to support someone else. It's helpful to them also, but that helps a lot with burnout, to think I can take the burnout that I'm having or someone else is having, and that can prompt me to give support to others. Another comment, honestly, recognizing that this is still a very unusual time and being compassionate with ourselves and others, putting on our mental shock absorbers. Yes, I like that very much. And I think most of us could get better at it than we are presently. Another comment, for me, burnout is highly correlated with lack of connection. I started my classes with time for students to connect with each other and with me again. So there's making room for students to process that. And then my wife and I also began daily hikes together. That is fabulous also. Well, I ended up, we didn't really have time for smaller groups, but I hope that you have people you can talk to about this without shame, and offering support and allowing others to support us. So thank you very much for my chance to talk with you about burnout.
Lynn, thank you for being here and for presenting to us. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody extends their appreciation as well. I'll turn it back to Sam.
Okay, thank you.
Great, that was fantastic. Thanks so much, Lynn and Mona and Nawako. I'm feeling less burned out now. This is good. If you are here on campus and order lunch, please come over to the dean's office and pick that up. And thanks again to Sarah for organizing our food for now. And So, and we'll be back at 12:15 for our co-rep session and discussion there. So it should be great, and hope you're able to participate in the other afternoon sessions. So thanks again to everyone.